Done. Call it a day.
I want one! Just kidding.
I touched them.
Just kidding.
All right, we are recording. All right, get this out of the way.
The Mass Pike's was moving. It's something on this road.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's 93 South is the worst.
Yeah.
All right, so
Want to just clarify for
Oh,
the
perfect.
upload?
so there is a massive traffic jam coming south on 93, and we've got Sherry here on speakerphone. Hopefully you can hear it, but she is
Poor thing's been in traffic for almost
right.
hour and a half, 2 hours, long time.
All right, so we are here debriefing Lee's lesson, and all right, so the video camera setup. I'm just going to remind us of the norms. Thanks, Gina. Norms on the agenda: start and end on time. Come prepared. Do your homework. Don't multitask. Be present while you are here. Have clear
I'm just doing
expectations.
what I can.
Right. Have clear expectations and flexible implementation. Don't leave anyone behind. Take risks. Limit war stories. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Know there is someone always available to answer questions. Allow for think time. Think it, say it. Actively listen, paraphrase, and ask for clarification. Don't criticize questions. Monitor airtime. Presume positive intentions. Honor that some need quiet when reflecting and writing. Be honest in constructive criticism. Remember to laugh and enjoy our time together. All right. So for 5 minutes here, we've got we're going to be setting the context for the lesson and describing the lesson being taught. So like the age level, what part of the day, etc.
Okay, so you saw my class, which was stood in the middle of the day, so it's one of those, Gina's familiar with it, it's like where I have them for 20 minutes, they have lunch, and then they come back for lunch, and then I have class with them. So this is like right after they've had lunch. There's a group of, there are about 26 students in that class. It would be, I guess, a middle of the road, they call it proficient in Braintree, so that means abilities, it's inclusion, so abilities are all over the place, it's not necessarily grouped by ability. And multiple students with IEPs, very energetic classroom in general. Lots of energy, but good, good kids. And we were talking about bridges. It's a 2-week unit. It's very short. They've been intro to bridges for a couple of days where we talked about different types of bridges, and we talked about stresses that affect bridges. And this was the point where I introduced a project in which they had to build their own bridge, in which we do it in the classroom. And we were going over like requirements for the bridge, and so I was trying to change it up to meet our strategy of like defining the problem, like as an engineering, where they have to ask questions to define the problem. So what you saw was me introducing it and them coming up with a series of questions to define the problem. So that's what you guys saw.
All right, so now we are going to.
Oh, can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I forgot to mention this. I changed seats and handed back a big test, and then I remembered to push play. So you missed about 5 to 7 minutes at the beginning of the class. So if it kind of jumps in the middle, that was why. And I don't know if I said that earlier on the paper or not. So that's something that you may notice. My classes are not normally 39 minutes.
So do you want to restate the questions from the pre-observation form?
I had my pre-observation
Yeah, I've
form.
got yours here, I think.
Okay, I could do that. I didn't print mine out. Oh, so the things you wanted me to look for, you mean? I mean, wanted you guys to look for?
Yep.
Okay. Are my students asking appropriate questions to help define the design challenge? Are all students participating and asking questions during the think, pair, share activity? Like, so was I using it in a way to encourage the most amount of students to participate as possible? And did the activity encourage dialogue between the students on that topic? So those were my questions.
All right. So now we're going to do our rounds of warm and cool feedback. We're going to start with warm feedback. All right, I'm going to put it for 12 minutes. We can go up to 15. All right. You still with us, Sherry?
I am. I can start.
All right. Yeah. So jump in anytime, and we'll
Okay.
just do a round.
So one of the things is at the very beginning of the project, students were focused on saying the questions were like about the project, but they were moved very quickly into asking questions specific for their objective that was clearly stated. They moved from, rather than asking about the project, and what they had to do. They quickly took the role on and the purpose and asked and transitioned their questions, and that was nice. I'm not supposed to say nice. So I recognize that.
And I'm going to piggyback on what you said, Sherry, because in addition to that, it was such an authentic problem, which I think we don't often do. It was so real life, and I thought that was very meaningful for the kids, and it made it, they were very engaging and trying to solve this real world problem.
I love, Lee, that you were really calm in your redirections. There was that girl that was sort of like center camera that was like making all these funny faces, and you just like dealt with that so calmly. And when the spill happened, you know, like the kids were freaking out, like, don't worry, it's just a spill, and you know, I love that.
So I thought also you, in introduction and even later on, continuously you asked them to explain, and I forget the young lady's name, but when she was asking a question and it wasn't clear and you couldn't understand, you explained there's not right or wrong, and we'll come back to that. And you did follow up rather quickly, come back, and she gave a good, rephrased her question. So that was a great opportunity to see that, you know, we're going to keep working at that and recognize.
And when the students were sharing the ideas, you would repeat it back, and then you'd pepper in the bridge vocabulary very seamlessly. Whether the kids realized it or not, it was just very fluid conversation, making sure that they were understanding the technology application as well, which was very nice because you did that so seamlessly with them. It was just a very natural flow.
I love that you had a model right up front for the kids to refer to. Like, you had the books, you had sort of the setup of the sort of thing that they were doing. You had that right good to go, so you could refer to that. And so, yeah, just like having a model, yeah.
So without having the paper in front of me, I'm trying to think of the particular things that we're to look at. But one of them, I remember your third question that was on there. All I simply put was yes in big capitals in my comments, because whatever that third question was, I just felt like they definitely were doing that. I don't know if you're looking at the form.
The third question was, did it encourage dialogue?
Yes. I remember thinking that I did see them engaging in dialogue. I felt that I couldn't hear, but they certainly were talking, and because they were serious in nature, making the assumption that it was right on the content as well.
Your wait time is great with the kids. You really allow
Yeah.
for wait time, which I think often we're always in such a hurry to, you know, finish and get this done and this done. But there was clearly great wait time with the kids.
So I think that it was very clear from the way that the kids were asking questions and everything. Oh, that means that we can't have a peer. I'm thinking, okay, peer. Like, I'm trying to like remember myself, like the components. It's very clear that whatever had happened before this lesson, they had that clear knowledge of the bridge types, the components of each bridge, and sort of like where they would be appropriate.
I'm going to add kind of two comments together. The structure that provided really opportunities for students to examine and explore questions from different angles, doing the sketches, organizing the different types of questions, thinking on their own, then talking with their group, then as a whole group. There were lots of different avenues to really examine all angles.
And I'll piggyback a little bit on that as well, Sherry. How you categorize the questions into site, materials, and load. I think those were the three.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really liked that too, because it just clarified what they were asking and expected to do.
Yeah, give them a good structure. I would say also, so I've got a couple lame ones that I'm gonna just throw out there. You said this already, but I thought it was great having the questions that define a problem, because so far we just sort of been on the other side of it, on the scientific questioning side, and it's good to see what the other aspect is for engineering. And I just, like, your class ran so smoothly, like the kids seemed to really enjoy it, and like just the sense of community in the classroom was really nice to see.
I wish I could think of others with my paper, but I can't. I'm kind of surprised I got that much in.
Okay, and then I'll just put then one more. I liked how there wasn't a printout, so the kids were really actively listening. They were responsible for taking notes on what the other kids were saying and the parameters of the actual design project.
Yeah, I love that. There was a kid who like wasn't writing down immediately, and Lee said, she was like, "I'm not giving you a handout on this. You better be writing it down so you know what you're supposed to do," or something like that. And it was just, he was like, "What?" And like shot up in the seat and started going.
I can think of one other. In addressing children, you use their names frequently, and I think one of your questions, I want to say it was the second one, was, are all students engaged or something of that sort. And I looked and said you called on multiple children, and you addressed rather quickly issues that students had. So I felt like, they definitely knew that you were looking and focusing on every individual student, that there was a lot of participation, and just by calling their names out, you could see that you were addressing all of them.
Should we move to cool feedback?
Yeah, because I'm not good with that. So I said, I like how you said that you would have the kids prioritize the questions and you'll only answer 10, but I think that you missed that part and that you actually answered way more than 10. And I'm like, I would have liked to have seen which 10 they picked. So when you first said that you were only going to pick 10, I'm like, I like that. I've never done that. I always, answer them all. And then I think we forget and we get caught up in the teaching and it's like, were there 10? And I actually have to go back and I'm like, no, there were more than 10. So I just would have liked to have seen how the kids actually prioritize them.
So I identified too my downfalls, and there are a couple of times when students were asking questions, and you clarified their questions rather than it seemed that them clarifying, which you may have done just knowing the students and thinking that it's just going to confuse them more. I'm not sure on that, but there were a couple of times it's like, I wonder what did they really mean that, or what you suggested was great, but I was just wondering on that.
So this is less of a cool feedback and sort of more of like as we like look at this practice and how to like explore it more, right? So like I wonder, because like watching that, there were some questions that kids had which were great, and there were some questions that kids had that were like, okay. And I wonder like if they realized that there were different strengths questions. So I wonder if there was a way of getting students to evaluate the strength of their own questions.
I put maybe consider letting them pair a little longer at the beginning because they were all so on task. And of course the reality is we only have so much time, but they were definitely on task and going. It would have been nice to see just how far they could have gone. But of course the reality is it was exactly one lesson, so.
So I was wondering about you breaking down those categories, whether they were able to formulate questions and then break them down to categories themselves, or even, kind of look at what type of questions they needed rather than you giving them the chance to begin with.
If you are in the building, please come to the conference room.
It may not have been necessary and for that purpose that you had, because I thought they were very much engaged, and you only have so much time.
Here's something that I was thinking about. I wondered if, because they had good questions, I just kind of wonder if, obviously this would take more time, but like if they had like super authentic answers to it. Like when you talked about that super goldfish, what if there was like a little half-page newspaper clipping that was like, oh my gosh, we've got these endangered goldfish, but these, horrible like public works people are trying to build a bridge right through this, and like, I don't know. there's something to get the kids more fired up into that, you know, like we gotta see these goldfish, guys, come on.
So now I'm going to play devil's advocate on one of the things that I actually really liked, but I'm also curious about, or I love the idea of them taking the notes. I actually thought that was awesome and not having the handout. However, I was just curious if you consider after that and you get all the notes, giving a handout, especially for the IEP. I know I have to give a lot of copies of the notes. So I was just curious, that's a great strategy for in the class, but is there going to be a hard copy provided after for the kids that kind of need that? And you can address that after, I know you can't talk, but at the end, so that was just something that came up because it was a real positive, but then also I could see it being a negative if there wasn't a follow-up for that.
So it was slightly frustrating for me personally not to see you writing on the board, and I know that the dynamics of the camera can be difficult, but I was also wondering about having the students write down as a group their thoughts to be posted up, and then kind of compare from group to group and see where they the questions that they focused on and how they might have evolved from the individual group questions. Is that clear or not?
All right.
Rather than you taking a person's question from a group and writing it up, a sense of what each group was doing, and that way you kind of get a measurement or a temperature of where the whole group is in terms of where they're progressing.
Right. I'm gonna hang up on that student's mother there. You still there, Shimmy?
Yeah.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. No, my phone. I'm just getting another call, and it's just gonna beep. So if you hear anything weird, that's all it is. We got about 2 minutes left for this. I am good for cool feedback. I have one more question here, but I don't understand what it means. So
I'm all set with the cool feedback as well.
all right. Are we good? All right. That beep. So I'm gonna guess you say sure.
Cherry?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry.
Do you
My
have any
phone's
more
beeping,
cool feedback? Chris and I are done with our cool feedback.
I'm done with my cool feedback.
Perfect, okay.
All right, so now is the time where we get to ask Lee any clarifying questions about the lesson, and Lee gets to answer. All right, only 5 minutes. Go.
So yes, I did.
Yes, I mean, just imagine.
Okay, because that was more because this was the first time I'd done it with that scenario. Normally I gave them a handout with the information. So in this case, what I did is we next day I said, okay, let's compile what you remember as being the criteria. We listed the criteria on the board, and then from there I typed it out for the class, and then everyone got a handout of what the criteria were.
But I love that strategy. Like, I definitely am going to consider using that because it really holds them accountable, and then you can give them it after. So I assumed as much that you did because obviously it was a well-planned lesson.
And then if students were absent, I had to be able to hand them
Right,
something as well so they
yeah.
could jump in, and so that was something, yeah, I did do that.
Yeah, just
I'll
from
try
the
using
video
that for
though, I
like,
wanted to ask that.
If doing like a 1-day challenge, that'd be kind of a cool thing to try out to start for me. Yeah.
And then one of the things I totally forgot about the prioritize.
Happens all the time, I
And
know.
I so wanted to do that because I wanted them
Yeah.
to go back and look at their questions and then think,
Mhm.
okay, which of these questions like are the most important information that I need to do this job? And then I lost it in that lesson. And I think
Yeah.
I hit it by the end of the day. I was hitting my stride, so like I was fine with that. But at that point, I forgot that I even said that.
And doesn't
I'm
that
sorry,
just...
I didn't hear. What did you forget to do?
I forgot that I told them to prioritize their questions so that I could then only answer the ones that they felt was the most important.
Okay.
I forgot. So I ended up answering what I thought, what I think were the most important questions versus them prioritizing and then me answering. So it wasn't the way I had intended to do it.
But I think that really piggybacks on what we've been studying in the literature and stuff too, where it talks about write down the good questions. Because you forget, like we get caught up in the heat of the lesson and just what we want to do and we forget, so.
Well, I was excited that they actually hit all of the things that I thought they had to hit. And they
Yeah.
did, which is what was great because at the time I was worried that some of my classes wouldn't even ask about the distance. Like I was worried they couldn't
Yeah.
ask some of those practical questions, and they did. Every single class did. So I was like, thank God. But that's where I think the think, pair, share really helped, because if they didn't think about it, then they got it when they were sharing with their pair or with the group.
So did you have a plan if they didn't? Like, would you have like not answered it and then had them like ask you like the next day as they started building?
I had one class that I didn't answer. There was a couple questions I didn't answer because they weren't concerned about, they didn't think about the endangered species. They didn't think about the fact that they couldn't put anything down. Like they didn't ask that. And then it came up later when they talked with each other in different classes.
And here,
So it
if you're
came up.
in the building, please come to the main office. Thank you.
We'll get to this part after, but it's just like the podcast where the guy said, you watch, the kids will ask the questions that you want them to ask anyways. Obviously there's a few outliers or whatever, but it was so interesting because I'm like, oh, they covered everything. Like she absolutely had the answer because those were what you wanted them to ask,
And
obviously.
And you had mentioned, Sherry, about my categories and like, should I have, like, it was helpful to structure it, but at the same time, like, could they have gotten there themselves? They probably could have. And I struggled with that a little bit. I think it helped some of my classes to have that structure, but I think I probably could have left it more open-ended for other classes. I mean, I could have left it more open-ended and then maybe had them sort them into categories or done something like that. So maybe down the road, that's a way for me to stretch out what I've done.
It all comes back to time though, like where
And
do you
yeah.
want to prioritize your time?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And even the idea of having like each student really could do like a poster paper that they stick up and like have each group's questions on there, and then they could look for similarities or patterns in the questions. Like I could have had them do something like that too. That's a great idea. But I'd have to think about timing. I'm so far behind right now as is that, but yeah, no, I think those are both like great suggestions.
did the snow affect you? No,
Is
I'm
it,
kidding.
is it appropriate for me? Is it clarifying questions that
Yeah, do you have a question
Yeah.
for me?
So yeah, I just did it in a minute and I can't write anything down. There was a thought and I'll have to come back to it, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to.
Oh, I just found it. So, if you don't mind.
Yep, go for it.
So, you've done this lesson before, but you changed it with the research. I suppose I can do that in the research question. Why don't I do that? I'll say, does that work?
No, I think go ahead and
Yeah,
ask
go
it because
ahead.
it'll transition us to the next thing, which is
Okay.
talking
So,
about.
You've done it before, and now with the research, you added the element of really exploring questions in the discourse. How do you feel that made how did you make those changes and transition and see the benefits? I guess you sort of your feelings and thoughts about that change that was made from how you taught before to the way you did what we viewed.
Well, I think what I'm gonna do, and I'm even gonna, like, based on what I did, I can already see other changes I'm gonna make again. But I liked it because I felt it was more authentic for the students in the sense that this was like, I think next time I'm gonna have them name and become a construction company, and they're gonna name themselves as a group, and then that'll be their like. And I think I'm actually gonna have them write out a bid next time and make them think about what materials they want, and in their bid they're gonna have to write how much they think they're gonna need, and like make them do more of that planning piece of it. Like I think I'm gonna take it more to that level than I did this time. I feel like they engaged right from the start about thinking about what they needed to do, like wrapping their head around the problem. So when they actually started to build, I actually feel like they have a better sense of what they had to do than me telling them what they had to do. So because they asked the questions and they had to pay attention to the answers, they were more prepared mentally to be thinking about, okay, how am I going to make this work? But they still struggle
I like the young
with
lady who
building.
asked if she could bring materials home, and I also liked your response that, it wasn't about who could get the materials or something to that nature, but I was thinking if they had some of the same choices of materials, then, you said it's about the design, not what the materials are, but I was thinking, maybe their thought process could also be in what materials make sense.
Yeah, but I'm limited on that. Basically, it's popsicle sticks and glue.
Yep.
So-
All right, we got to move on to the
Thank you.
course of study. So now all of us, including Lee, are gonna connect to what we observed from the research article. So did it implement the research? So how to connect to the questioning, how it connected to discourse, and then how can the research inform the lesson if it was to be repeated? All right.
I'll start if you want. As far as the research, well, I did touch upon it a little bit, really talking about how I think giving the kids credit, and they really came up with just everything that you wanted them to, and I think that's so cool because sometimes you think, well, yeah, in a perfect world, that's what's going to happen, but I don't know if that's going to happen in my class. And when it does, I just think it's great. And then the think, pair, shares were awesome. They really made the most of their time, shared it out. There was great conversation. And going back to your questions, they were all participating. And positively as well, like they were all on task.
I wish I could have brought you around to more tables, so I apologize for that. That's something that I'm not good at. Sherry did a good job with that, but I have to do better with that. But
So yeah, I mean, so like, here's what I wrote down. Like, obviously, like the think, pair, share was great, and I used it a couple different times. I thought the question was, I thought more like integrated than necessarily like than Gina and I had. I thought because it was like clearly if they didn't do that, they're not going to know how to build, right? And I thought it was more extraneous. I think on our lessons.
Well, hers was a very specific goal, whereas ours I think was a more isolated lesson.
Yeah.
Well, no, yours wasn't. Yours actually ended up working great.
yeah, I thought yours was.
No,
tied
yours
in.
was actually awesome, and it ended up with the project. Mine was a very isolated lesson, and I think actually when I do the global warning, I'm going to use those techniques that you did, and I'm definitely going to incorporate the limiting to 10 questions and see how.
They
Like,
prioritize
if I
it.
remember, but yeah, but I like those strategies, and I think that's important. That the more we think about it, the more we'll implement these techniques.
The one question I had about it is like, think about the discourse whole class, right? So like there was a lot of discourse in there. I wondered like when they were sharing, because it was a lot of teacher, student, and like it had to be at that point, right? But and I'm certainly not an expert in something like that, but like how could it be more, because it's the greatest when like a kid stands up and said, well, that's kind of like that question though, and like what if we ask it like this, and like how to structure it more to get that happening where the kids are.
Well, I don't know, but I think that's leading to like the accountable talk thing where you can have students bouncing off each other's ideas or using sentence starters, like maybe even requiring like before you can comment on your new idea, tie it into an idea that's already been said. So then they have to pay attention to what other people are talking about so that they have to tie it in. So I agree with you. It was very teacher-student, and I'm trying to figure out ways to get away from that because I feel like then I'm controlling that piece of it when it comes out onto the board, but maybe having more of that discourse student to student. I'm not sure.
Do you find though that you thought it was very teacher, but it actually wasn't, but the kids really felt like they came up with it? Because I think if I was a student leaving that class, I would be like, we just knocked that out of the park. Like we totally, like I think they really felt that they came up with it.
Yeah, I guess so.
You know
That's
what I mean?
true,
You
yeah.
really facilitated, and as opposed to having it be very teacher directed, it was definitely more facilitation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their questions were very right on, and I also, they wanted to ask more. You could see that. You could hear them in the discourse asking some questions, and that was really cool. They were thinking. I mean, it was them thinking.
I mean, I gotta say this. So I've never done, I do lots of engineering, well not lots, but I do some engineering challenges, and I've never tried it like that. And like that was like you were running a clinic on how to do it.
Yeah, you
To be
think
honest.
so?
No, honestly.
No, honestly, that could have been on the podcast. It was very well done.
Yeah.
I felt, well,
Wait,
thank you.
it
I
was
appreciate
really
that, but
well
I
done.
felt like I felt bad that first of all I cut off the whole front of the lesson, and then I was like I didn't bring you around to the groups. But they are one of my classes, and I picked them specifically. They are high energy. Like they would zoom around that room if they could. You know what I mean? But they energize. Like they love that kind of stuff. So it was fun working through it with them. Like I really enjoy them as a group of students. Like you said, the community feel there is pretty strong. But I enjoyed that. I would definitely play with it more. I would, like you say, make it a more authentic experience. I like the idea of playing around with the endangered species, and that'd be cool. And but like maybe making, but then I have to think about timing and like how long I can draw that out.
Or maybe even that could be like a homework assignment, like the night before. Hey, we got like this cool thing, and like it could be like a newspaper with like 3 or 4 mini articles on it. There's like 1 page front and back, like, you know, there's too much traffic. They're thinking about building a bridge, but like here's these protesters saying you can't because there's, I don't know. Like,
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah.
So like they come
That's
in and
cool.
like, well, what about these? You know, and,
Yeah, get
well,
them
this-
thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I like that. That's cool. But I felt like
But yeah, I mean, it's
Good
like time
twist.
kills everything. I mean, that's the thing. It's like putting in these questions. It's like that. I mean, like so, like on my day of questioning, like I felt like it was great that they came to that. Like I felt like they were much more prepared for doing the research and much more, like it seemed more authentic. It seemed like they owned it, but it was also like a whole day of of time.
Absolutely. But I guess that's why these are practices that are integrated into it, so it's worth the time, I think,
Yeah.
It is.
to do it.
Well, I imagine so in doing it before, the class itself seems great. Did you find that the product or their after effects were different because you did the process different?
Honestly, I felt like the bridges, because there's one thing to design and plan, and it's quite another to build. And I feel like lots of times the kids fall into the same trap with building, where they have these grand ideas and then time runs out. And so I actually feel like the bridges that were made were very similar in years past, but they definitely, I felt the transition from what they have to do to start building was faster, because I felt like they were able to wrap their head around what the problem was and able to quickly think about solutions, versus sometimes it would take them longer to design it because they weren't really necessarily sure about what the problem itself was. So I think that transition from, okay, this is the problem, to, okay, this is what I think the solution is, was faster.
You know how have you seen the Museum of Science, how they do their engineering design process as like a loop? I wonder, like, have you considered like doing like a mini like consultancy for like half a day, like as they start building it, as they start seeing, oh, this is failing for here, or this is failing for that reason, like a mini consultancy about like generate some questions about like where it's feedback, but through questions like how could you make it stronger, like it's wobbling, how could you make sure that
Oh, like at the end of the day, put their bridges up there and have it as a class, like kind of look at it and say, okay, this is what I noticed, this is what I see about your bridge. Because we did that when they went to test, where the kids would like look at it and say, ooh, it's wobbling here, or I can see
but
it
sort of
bending already.
like maybe a third of the way through the process. So like, oh crap, here's a problem we see that we're having, but like maybe you can't figure out why it's happening. Maybe another question from another group might ask might. I don't know.
No, that's a cool idea. Kind of like troubleshooting,
Right.
like, but with
Well,
questioning
and
techniques.
define the problem
Mm-hmm.
in using questions to define a problem, because then there's going to be another problem that maybe it's leaning or.
Yeah, and the books will fall off, which was something that they couldn't have happen also. So.
Right.
No, that's a good idea too. There's so many ways, which I love about this, is you can take these lessons, and when you like get to talk about it with you guys, you can see it in lots of different perspectives, which is cool.
Going back to what you said about you think the transition was easier, because the kids are probably thinking about how they're going to build it as they're asking the questions and answering it. So they already kind of had it in their back pocket, so to say. You know what I mean? They had already started being vested in it. So, and that's an interesting observation that you made with that.
I also like the way you presented it. You didn't say we're going to make a bridge out of obstacle sticks. You did that so gradually that it seemed like they were, it wasn't at the beginning. I'm like, okay, that you didn't degrade it down to we're going to do popsicle sticks now. And it was done so well. And I think they got a sense of really about building their bridge and not have been as focused on the real life situation.
I think we're good with this section. How are you doing on the highway there, Sherry? Are you
I
good?
just got off the exit.
Okay, that's great. The next step is looking at student work. Do you want us to?
Yeah. I was thinking of that. I'm like, I don't want to miss that. So
Why don't we pause
you're
the?
welcome to look at it.
Well, the first one is evidence of student learning from the video. Just from what we saw, we could talk about it
Okay.
and look at it.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And by then you might be able to, because it's right off the exit.
Yep. So I mean, the vocabulary that they used, that all the kids were using, was very clear. That from a pure to the beam. I don't teach bridges, so it's like for me, listening, what is it, beam? It took me a couple minutes to figure out beam bridge. And so it's very clear that they had strong content knowledge of the different types of beam bridges, their components, and when you said, "Oh, it can't touch," and the kids are like, "Oh, that means we can't do," I forget what exactly they said, but it
Here
was
maybe or something. And I put the
but they
thingy
made
down.
sure-
I just said that.
And then the girl was, one girl said, "Oh, I'm gonna write that down." When someone was saying something, she was definitely, they were excited about it and aware that they needed to be responsible for what was there, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that was short, so I tried.
It's interesting because I felt like I tried to incorporate the vocab when I was doing the facilitating, because I felt like they were using it somewhat, but not necessarily always appropriately, because I felt like they were still working it. But I love by the end of this project, they use the word span and talking about the distance and span, what that was, and the beam versus an arch, and what's the pressures, the stresses are. So they got there. They weren't necessarily there at that point that you guys saw them, but they definitely got there.
It was very evident though. It's I was thinking back to when you teach a little kid to talk, and if a little kid says, "I throwed up," and you'll say, "Oh, you threw up, honey?" And then, so you would repeat their question and then bring that vocab back just so seamlessly. It was nice.
Yeah.
Where the kids didn't, I think, feel like they were being corrected or anything at all. It was just.
Yeah, and I tried with that one student because I wasn't even sure what her, I think, Sherry, you mentioned it, I wasn't even sure where she was trying to go with her question.
Yeah.
I was just what? Think about that a little more and we'll come back to you.
I think it was Nadia.
Oh, Nadia. But Nadia has these great ideas, but she processes at a different rate, so she needs that time lots of times. She's
And
awesome.
then with Natty too, he was so, even though he was, you had mentioned raise your hand, or I think that was one of the ones, but I did notice that they appropriately talked and had discourse when they were told to, and stopped when they needed to. And you mentioned that active listening, and there was definitely learning that happened because of what had been put in place and them following the directions. And I think at one point they were asking about, do I fail? And you said, well, you'll fail for that part, and that's just because you're not following something to the effect that, not following the requirements of the directions or I forget the exact words, but it was very clear that, you need to follow that information, and that's part of listening as well as speaking and discourse. You have to listen to the ideas.
And actually, one of the biggest challenges of that project is them working together as a group. They have a hard time with that.
Do you think the groups?
I do pick those groups because that could be an epic fail sometimes if I don't.
Alright, let's look at some more.
Okay. So these were the sheets that they were given. This one, they have a front and a back, so you can see not all of them were completed. I only grabbed one from each group to show what they decided upon and what they were going to do. They didn't.
This was given to them the first day. That's what they were working on when.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is what they had in front of them when I asked them to write down their questions individually. So they had an area for site questions, material questions, and load requirement. And then we brainstormed, and then they went down to develop possible solutions, and I had them answer A, C, and D. I told them they could miss B at that point because I was trying to save time. And you'll notice a lot of these students wrote like arch bridge or suspension bridge. Like they're not really realizing that they only get popsicle sticks still. It takes them a little while to get through that.
You do an arch bridge with the possible. You just gotta soak
You
in
could.
water first.
Well, actually, you could do an arch design that presses against the abutments, like the books, and supports it, but it takes planning. And I've had students successfully do that, but most of them start off and then end up putting putting it.
Can I interrupt for a minute? It's a technical question. I'm going to park where I parked before. And that door, is there a way for me to get in?
The bottom of the U? Sorry, the one. Yeah, I'll come down and let you in. Are you here?
I am parking, yes.
All right, I'll be right down.
Thank you.
Should we pause the video or
Want to shut your phone off too, so you don't run your battery down?
pause?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll turn off. We're turning you off.
I don't know
Sharon.
how to pause this. Do I just?
I don't know, because we'll be able to be turned back on to the same video.
No, you know, we'll just
Leave it
run.
on, 5 minutes.
I don't know how
There
to
you
turn
go.
off your phone. It's just blank. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah. There we go. This one has the full thing, like, because I gave them, and then this is the rubric, and then
Yeah.
the student wrote down, like, this has everything. I didn't get all that from all of them.
When South does it,
They take it home, right?
I don't know about that, but they don't use 10 books, they use weights to start off, but then the strongest ones, they actually have Mr. Casey come down and stand on it. Do you know Mr. Casey? He's a big guy.
Well, we have Mr. L stand on
Oh,
ours
do you?
sometimes,
That's
yeah.
They love that.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? They
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. But I thought that South did the project, it's a home project versus a school
I
project.
can't answer that. I
Yeah,
don't
I'm
know.
positive it is, I know it is. 'cause
You
I've
probably
talked-
know more than me
Yeah,
on that.
I've
because-
touched base with them about it, so they go
Yeah.
home, so that's why the kids at
So they
East-
do it individually?
They
Oh.
can work in groups,
Okay.
but they do it as a home project, so that's why the kids come home and they're always like, oh, but South did it this way, and I'm like, yeah, but we're doing it this way, and that's where the materials question comes in, because they use different
Oh.
materials, sometimes they use popsicle sticks, but glue becomes an issue.
Okay.
Because you can buy Gorilla Glue, you can buy,
Yeah,
you know,
Crazy glue.
Crazy
or-
Glue.
yeah.
These guys use
Elmer's.
white standard glue. I
Yeah.
used wood glue one year, and then I was just like, eh. And so now it's standard glue, so that way I don't have to pile 80 books on top to make them break.
Mhm.
And
No, I thought it was great.
so,
It's amazing how strong some of the kids make them.
yeah.
It's really impressive.
We had 60 textbooks on one bridge, which is roughly, these are about 1.8 pounds, like they're almost 2 pounds a book. So, I mean, that's quite a bit of weight, and that's with just regular glue.
Yeah,
So they did a really good job.
that's awesome. Plus, they love doing it.
They do. They start off, they love
This
it.
is a nice worksheet too.
I hope so. I mean, it's one of those things that I'm looking for feedback.
Is this
from
your
you guys.
first year doing this worksheet?
This worksheet I've done before. I switched it around though
Okay.
to have the questioning on it.
Yeah.
And I switched it around to making sure they do a top view and a side view
Yeah.
to make them think about it from different perspectives. And then they have the final sketch, which is the one they want to build.
Well, that's right in the technology component too, the ornithological, whatever they call them.
Yeah, the type of drawing.
Hey!
Oh wow, you got a lot of student work there.
There's snacks in there too.
Awesome.
Now I get to look at your student work.
Yes.
It's great. Yeah, really.
There's one.
Wow,
There's a
these
bunch.
multipliers, huh?
Yeah, I just threw them all out there. So, that student, he didn't do this part. His group, he came in later, so he never did that. So, but he did his drawings. I turned it in because I loved his drawings. I thought he did a good job.
Cool.
One of them has one Gina has the rubric that gets passed out along with it.
You can really read these questions well here though, so you can see. Trafficking. I like, the questions really are not, yes, no, they really require explanations.
And there's a lot of bridge vocab in them, which is nice.
And some of them draw like he's like, look at this. Who is this? Rachel. Oh my God, look at
Well,
that.
that is interesting,
like,
like what we were just
wow.
talking about with the evolution books too. We don't get to see a lot of that side of the kid, so it's when we do, it's,
I love doing the sketches. I love, like, any
Yeah.
opportunity I can get them to draw. I love that. And I said, okay, it's okay if you're not a great drawer. That's why we label.
yeah.
And so
Yeah,
this-
evolution books, everything's
Yeah.
like a dog, dog's teeth.
whatever you need to label.
This was done on their own.
This
And
was
then
like
they
the
discussed.
think, compare, share, right? So they thought
Right.
about this part on their own, and then we discussed, and then they did this with their group. So they answered these 3 questions with their groups. And then they went on to do sketches. I asked them to individually do their own sketches of what they thought it should be
So
like.
they do that part, that was the homework part, or did
Yeah.
they, okay.
They ended up doing this for homework, their sketches, and then they came back together and they came up with a group design description, their final sketch of what they wanted to do based on as a group decision. So this part they did on their own, and then this was their group decision.
That's nice, it's right there.
And then I collected one of these per group, so I had a sense. But you'll see some groups, actually not many of them, some groups were still holding on to like an arch type of design or a combo type of design. That one has the rubric that I use to grade. So, yeah, yeah.
That was another question I had, now, I can focus on just one thing rather than, I know they were asking about scores, did they have a rubric ahead of time?
Yep, so when they
Or-
got this, it was stapled. This is the only one that shows it was stapled with it.
Okay,
So they got a rubric as far as how they were gonna be graded. That one, that's what they got.
So
They-
sorry.
They just didn't, their bridge didn't actually hold the 10 books, so
That's
they,
alright.
10 books seemed to quite a bit.
Is it 1
And-
point per book, or is it 20 points, 2 points per book?
it was, like I did a percentage, so if they got 7 out of 10, they got that same percentage out of 20, because I
Yeah.
gave it a 20-point category.
Perfect, yeah.
So I just did it that way, yeah. They still don't fail, but.
So it's difficult for me looking at student work, whether it's yours or ours, and sort of seeing where the questions, like, did the questions make it stronger or
Yeah,
not.
sure.
It's difficult. Like, it was a lot easier when we were doing, like, my group was feedback, because you could look at the students' feedback and then we looked at the first draft and the second draft and whether it helped or not, right? And so that was a lot easier. I think it's so much more difficult when you're looking at questioning, and who's to say whether this helped. I mean, like, I think it did. Like, my gut as a professional says yes, it did. But I mean, I guess that last question here, like, can it be more than one span? Like, there's not a single correct or incorrect answer that I'm seeing, right? Like, they got that because they asked about that and they heard about the goldfish.
No, this one said yes.
By the
So,
way,
you know,
my
I think
favorite
it's-
question from that hour.
Silver and
is-
gold.
It's like, how can we a goldfish if it's silver?
Classic.
But the other thing too, that I also feel is when I'm looking at someone else's work or other students rather than my own, I don't know if what they've done is really good for them. You have certain levels, kids have certain levels and abilities, and so one work might be great for one student, but that same work from another student, you would be, say, you haven't even tried. So I think that's hard too when you're looking at other students' work to know, are they really rising or not? Because you don't know the child to know whether that's their best quality or not.
I think it also goes back to the process versus product. Like, we want the kids to just be asking questions naturally and teaching them how to do that and giving them opportunities to know that. We may not see it straight away, but we know that it's the right thing to do and we're learning better ways to do it. And I think just trusting in the process and
It's like a long
stepping outside our own comfort zone, like you said, you changed the lesson. I know I changed my lesson. You changed your lesson. Getting outside your own comfort zone and saying, you know what, I can do it, and it's good for them, so I'm going to try it again. And I had success with it.
And see the attitudes changing.
Yeah.
Like, when we did that, the lesson, we put up that question board. Like, we did the show what you learned at the end, the little X ticket thing, and then one of my kids said, no, I got a question. I was like, okay, what's your question? The kids, because that was not what the show was on. He just had a legitimate question about space. I was like, that is a great question. You should write it up there. We're like, you did that on purpose. And I'm like, but we're trying to get out of that where they feel like they need to have the answer,
Yeah.
right? Like, immediately, right?
Yes.
So like, I guess it's the long-term run, right?
I think so. I mean, because like you said, I mean, it's very hard to say, well, did it go better than when you didn't do it this way? And I think we just have to trust in the process and know that the experience of doing it is good for them, even if we can't test it. You know, we can't test everything. So.
And I think that
we test too much anyways.
Yeah, and I think that if I had remembered to have them prioritize their questions, that would have also given us a sense of, do they realize what's important versus what's frivolous information, and that would have been a way of evaluating too, like were they understanding the problem? You know what I mean? Like what was the most important things that they needed to know?
Mm-hmm.
But I forgot that piece, but
Yeah.
something
We're
that-
also human.
Yeah,
But the other thing in any given lesson that we probably do, you have some mental notes, and I think we intuitively sometimes the next day mention it or do something to offset and take care of what we thought maybe we would do better, you know?
We got any more comments on student work? So the next step is that we all share
What we learned.
what's legal in the last, something we learned from this.
I just think seeing more strategies and more successes like encourages me and motivates me to do it more or again. Especially like now, I can't wait to try that prioritizing the 10 questions because I'm like, that is so great. I really want to try that. So I think that's important when we see each other's work and see the successes that it, you know, empowers us and says, you know, we say, like, yeah, let's do it. And we see different little strategies, and every little strategy, it's like a recipe from this cookbook, a recipe from this cookbook. And then you have a month's worth of great, you know, meals. Same thing here, you know, getting little ideas and putting them together to just become better teachers, so.
I mean, I agree. I think this is something that next engineering design challenge I do, I'm gonna, you know, whether it's a short little thing at the start of the lesson or whether it's a day or whatever, I'm gonna be using that strategy and seeing if the kids really get what they need to know. Because if not, then they're probably thinking, why are they telling me this? You know, which is not helpful. So.
I think one of the things you mentioned at the beginning of this debriefing is that really having lessons be authentic and refer to real life situations makes a tremendous difference, and that takes a lot of pre-planning. It's easy to just put it together and do a lesson and teach the vocab and teach the concepts, but connecting it is really important, and the more that can be done, the better, and sometimes it doesn't take a real lot to do that.
Yeah, and I feel like with the questioning piece, I've been thinking about it more often. So like watching the different lessons and thinking about how to integrate that practice. I've definitely, like I used a questioning board with one of my new lessons, and they asked tons of questions, and then remembering to be like, okay, remember that question you asked? We're talking about it today, you know, like we're gonna be working on it. Just thinking about ways to get the students to really hit at their natural curiosity and really build upon that. So it's more, like you said, an authentic experience coming from what they want to know versus what I need to tell them or what I feel like I need to tell them based upon standards. It's like, who doesn't want to know more about volcanoes? They're the coolest thing.
Yeah,
ever.
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, come on, the one in Chile with the lightning coming down. Come on.
I've never even
Wow.
heard of that. Yeah, that was crazy.
So it's definitely, and now like what I love is the kids like will take pictures of bridges and they'll bring them in. They're like, check out this truss system, and we're like, wow.
Yeah.
So it's like they get excited about it, and they're recognizing it around them, and that's all that happens. Great, they're paying more attention to the world around them.
And you're just starting astronomy. Remind me to give you a couple of apps that I gave the kids to download for free. And oh my God, same thing. They'd come in, I saw Jupiter, like Jupiter, and they were so excited they couldn't believe it. And the second they take it outside the classroom, I'm ecstatic. That's it. Wow, you even thought about science after 2:30. Thank you.
Exactly.
Nice
It's
job, though,
in
Lynn.
the world
Really
around
nice
you.
job with that
I appreciate
lesson.
that. Thank you. So it's been good. Like I think these things always make you think about things in different ways. Push you, which is what
Yeah,
you need to have happen. I need to have happen.
all of us.
And it's nice to have someone, you do work day after day, and it's nice to have someone come in, but it's so
Thank you.
hard to encapsulate in one class period.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll do the next
We are not doing the pre-observation dialogue because
'Cause we're done.
We're done.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm
Well, we did
about
it
to-
last
About to debrief the last
Right.
one. Great.
So we'll take